Night inside Hitler's bunker was never truly silent. Even after the voices disappeared, even after the footsteps faded through the concrete corridors, there was always another sound waiting in the darkness. The distant thunder of Soviet artillery, the trembling vibration of collapsing buildings above Berlin, the metallic hum of bunker ventilation systems echoing endlessly underground. And somewhere inside those final nights, Adolf Hitler began to fear something he could no longer control. Because the night had become more than darkness. It had become reality. During the day, Hitler could still perform. He could still sit beside military maps, still issue commands, still speak about victory as though Germany had not already lost the war. But night was different. Night stripped away illusion, and the deeper the Third Reich collapsed, the more dangerous the darkness became to him psychologically. By 1945, witnesses described Hitler as a man trapped between exhaustion, paranoia, and denial. He slept very little. He wandered through bunker corridors after midnight. He held late-night conversations that shifted unpredictably between calm reflection and explosive rage. But strangely, Hitler's fear of the night did not begin inside the bunker. It had followed him for years, long before Berlin collapsed, long before the war even started, and understanding why reveals something deeply disturbing about the psychology of one of history's most destructive leaders. Because Hitler was not simply afraid of darkness, he feared silence, he feared vulnerability, and most of all, he feared losing control over the world he had created around himself. And in the final months of World War II, that fear consumed him completely. To millions of Germans, Adolf Hitler appeared unstoppable. Nazi propaganda carefully crafted the image of a tireless leader devoted entirely to Germany's future. He stood beneath giant lights during rallies. He delivered speeches with terrifying confidence. He projected strength, certainty, and total control. But privately, Hitler's relationship with nighttime was very different. His daily routine was strange even during the height of his power. He rarely woke early. He often stayed awake until 3 or 4 in the morning. Dinner meetings stretched deep into the night. Movie screenings inside his headquarters sometimes continued until dawn. Entire sections of the Nazi government adapted themselves around Hitler's unusual schedule. Military officers waited hours for meetings. Officials delayed important decisions because Hitler was still asleep during the day. At first, many people dismissed this behavior as eccentricity. But over time, it became clear that nighttime affected Hitler psychologically in ways that daylight did not. Witnesses described long monologues where he spoke endlessly about betrayal, destiny, conspiracy theories, and Germany's future. Sometimes he appeared calm and strangely thoughtful. Other times he exploded into uncontrollable rage. And increasingly, those emotional swings became strongest after dark. Especially as the war turned against him, but the roots of this behavior may have begun much earlier, long before he became dictator, long before Nazi Germany even existed. As a young man in Vienna, Hitler lived in deep isolation. He failed to enter art school. He struggled financially. He drifted through cheap apartments and homeless shelters, spending years disconnected from normal social life. Historians believe these years shaped his personality permanently. He became withdrawn, obsessive, emotionally detached, and nighttime intensified those traits. Because nights are dangerous for people who cannot escape their own thoughts. During daylight, distraction exists, crowds exist, movement exists, but at night, the mind becomes louder. And for Hitler, whose worldview increasingly depended on fantasy and control, silence itself may have become psychologically threatening. As he rose politically during the 1920s and 1930s, Hitler learned how to transform fear into power. He mastered emotional manipulation during speeches. He understood lighting, symbolism, and crowd psychology better than almost any political leader of his era. Many Nazi rallies were deliberately designed for nighttime. Searchlights pierced the sky like massive pillars. Darkness surrounded enormous crowds. The atmosphere felt almost religious, and Hitler stood at the center of it all. This mattered psychologically, because in public darkness, Hitler controlled the fear. He controlled the emotion. He controlled the audience. But private darkness was different. Private darkness could not be controlled so easily. And over time, that difference became critical. As World War II spread across Europe, Hitler's lifestyle became increasingly isolated from ordinary reality. He spent long periods inside military headquarters, hidden deep within forests and fortified compounds. The most famous was the Wolf's Lair in East Prussia. These locations were heavily guarded, isolated and claustrophobic. Concrete bunkers replaced open spaces. Artificial lighting replaced natural rhythms. The outside world felt distant, and Hitler appeared increasingly comfortable, living separated from normal human life. But isolation changes people, especially leaders surrounded only by fear and loyalty. Inside these headquarters, Hitler's nightly habits intensified further. He stayed awake late discussing military strategy, architecture, racial ideology, and conspiracy theories. He watched films obsessively, sometimes several in one night. Meanwhile, Germany burned through resources on battlefields across Europe. And slowly, Hitler became disconnected from reality itself. This disconnect became catastrophic after 1941, because that was the moment the war began turning against him. The invasion of the Soviet Union became a disaster. German forces became trapped in brutal winter warfare. Entire armies disappeared. Casualties exploded. And for the first time, Hitler's image of invincibility began to crack. But psychologically, Hitler could not accept failure. Instead, he blamed others. Generals became traitors, officers became cowards, anyone delivering bad news became an enemy, and nighttime became the stage where these frustrations erupted most violently. Military officers described terrifying late-night meetings where Hitler screamed over maps for hours. His hands trembled, his face appeared pale and exhausted. His mood shifted unpredictably between fantasy and rage. Some nights he spoke calmly about impossible counterattacks. Other nights he exploded into fury over military retreats that existed only because his own strategies had failed. And the deeper Germany's military situation collapsed, the less sleep Hitler seemed capable of getting. This matters more than it first appears, because chronic sleep deprivation changes the human mind. It damages judgment, emotion, impulse control, decision-making. And historians increasingly believe Hitler's deteriorating mental condition deeply influenced the final years of the war. By 1944, the situation had become even worse. After the failed assassination attempt against him in July, Hitler's paranoia intensified dramatically. Now he trusted almost no one. Generals became suspects. Officers became potential conspirators. Fear consumed the Nazi leadership from within. And at night, those fears grew even larger. Because darkness magnifies uncertainty. Every sound feels dangerous. Every silence feels threatening. And Hitler's world was becoming increasingly built on fear itself. Then came Berlin, and the bunker. This was where Hitler's fear of the night reached its most terrifying form. By early 1945, Germany was collapsing completely. Soviet forces closed in from the east. American and British armies advanced from the west. German cities burned beneath constant bombing. Millions were dead. And beneath the ruined streets of Berlin, Adolf Hitler retreated underground into the Führerbunker. The bunker itself felt unnatural, no sunlight, no fresh air. Only concrete corridors, electric lighting, stale atmosphere, and endless tension. Time lost meaning underground. Day and night became psychological concepts instead of physical realities, but even there, night still mattered, because nighttime brought the sounds. Artillery strikes above the city, explosions shaking the bunker walls, distant machine gun fire echoing through Berlin, the collapse of Hitler's empire happening directly above his head. Witnesses described an atmosphere of suffocating dread. Staff members whispered nervously, people moved quietly through corridors. Everyone understood the end was approaching, and Hitler himself appeared physically destroyed. The charismatic dictator who once screamed before massive crowds was now a trembling old man. His posture bent forward. His hands shook constantly. His skin appeared pale and bloated. He walked slowly, often touching walls for support. And psychologically, he seemed trapped between denial and terror. At night, the bunker became even more oppressive. Artificial lights cast long shadows across concrete walls. Ventilation systems created endless mechanical humming, and every artillery impact reminded